going to be having your show also at 5, talking about all the Tony Parker stuff and probably Kawhi. So I guess, just really talking about it and kind of seeing if you what's to talk there, what's kind of been going on, or anything besides of what happened recently today. Did we know any of this was going to happen before today?
Well, I think a lot of Spurs fans sensed that Tony Parker might be going. We knew he was an unrestricted free agent. And, last year, Tony was sent to the bench during the season. DeJounte Murray, the young point guard, is now the starting point guard for the Spurs. So everybody kind of had a sense, if he could make more money somewhere else, Tony Parker might go somewhere else. And as it turned out, the Charlotte Hornets, their new head coach, James Borrego, is a former Spurs assistant. He was an assistant for Gregg Popovich in the Spurs just last season. So Tony Parker is going to be on a team with a coach that he knows very, very well in James Borrego. And I saw in a statement, Tony Parker said, I'm excited to play for my all-time idol, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is the owner of the Charlotte Hornets. So what I'm hearing is the Spurs wanted to bring Tony Parker back, but they would have brought him back at less money. They would have offered probably, $5, maybe $7 million to Tony Parker, whereas he gets $10 million for 2 years to go to Charlotte. So I think financially it was a good move for Tony Parker, and I think Charlotte probably paid him more money than San Antonio was willing to pay him right now.
So obviously all the stars kind of aligned for Tony in his mind, of going to Charlotte. And he'll be, again, you're right. He'll be playing under Borrego, which I know is a huge deal for him. And he'll also be playing behind Kemba Walker, though. So does that really is that still kind of like the same thing as if he was playing behind DeJounte Murray here or in San Antonio?
But, I think it comes down to the money. And I think Tony maybe realizes, I think as outside observers and as Spurs fans, we kind of saw this past season. Father Time is undefeated. It looks like Tony Parker may have lost a step. And, this is not a big deal to somebody like a Manu Ginobili. As you know, Manu has been coming off the bench for the Spurs for many, many years now. And one of the virtues of coming off the bench is you're typically playing against the other team's second unit. So a guy like a Tony Parker or a Manu Ginobili can actually play really good basketball against competition on a second unit that might not be as good as he is. But I think perhaps Tony Parker kind of realized or was resigned to the fact that maybe his value to a team, whether it's Charlotte or San Antonio or someone else now, is to be a veteran in the locker room, that veteran leadership, and maybe coming off the bench and contributing in that way. Maybe that's something that Tony Parker realized when it happened to him last year in San Antonio.
Yeah, I know that just looking on Twitter and, of course, seeing all my friends, back home, it seems obviously that the community of San Antonio is obviously heartbroken, but they're definitely happy for Parker to, move on and kind of do something that he still wants to do towards the end of his career.
Yeah, and you know what? But you look at this summer, the city of San Antonio could very well be shell-shocked if you think about it. We lose Tony Parker today. He goes to Charlotte. The Kawhi Leonard situation continues. Most analysts believe he won't be a Spur by the start of training camp. But, most people think the move will be made. And then there's the question of Manu Ginobili. Manu turns 41 years old later this month. And any day now, certainly this month, we're going to get a decision from Manu Ginobili. So it's quite possible the Spurs could lose Tony Parker, Kawhi Leonard, and Manu Ginobili in the same summer, perhaps in the same month, or in the same couple of weeks. So while there's sadness for Spurs fans, we love Tony Parker, and as you know, he's part of that era, big three, Tim, Tony, and Manu. We hate to see him go. We're happy he's somewhere he wants to be. But, if we lose Manu and Kawhi, you lose arguably, other than LaMarcus Aldridge now, three of your biggest names on the roster, all in a matter of a few days in the month of July. That could be crazy.
No, I agree. And Chris, I want to talk to you a little bit about Kawhi, this whole Kawhi situation. Somebody had mentioned to me, we heard Tony Parker talk months ago saying, well, I had a worse injury, mine was 10 times worse, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that had any motive at all for Tony Parker to leave, or Kawhi mentioning anything at all about he was obviously not happy about that comment?
Yeah, well, apparently, and according to reports, as you mentioned, Kawhi Leonard was not happy about that comment. In fact, there were some reports saying that the Tony Parker comment that you mentioned was the straw that broke the camel's back as far as Kawhi Leonard wanting to get out of San Antonio and reportedly saying things like he never wants to be in that Spurs locker room again. Now, I have seen some people report this afternoon since Tony Parker signed with Charlotte that, while Tony was disappointed in Kawhi Leonard's lack of communication with the team and behavior over the past season, that probably did not contribute to his leaving. We may not know for sure unless we hear from Tony Parker, but certainly, that was certainly a bitter moment probably for Tony Parker that whole season, and the moment he spoke to the media and said that his injury was 100 times worse than Kawhi's. According to reports, it set off Kawhi as well.
And I guess moving on with Kawhi, I mean, what has been the talk for many of y'all's journalists and analysts there in San Antonio? I mean, what is everybody kind of thinking? Because my personal feeling is I feel like he's lost a lot of respect from a lot of fans, for one, and just the fact that he's kind of been this shot in the dark for so long, and we don't have a clear answer of what he truly wants. It makes us hard to really respect him and really want him even back on the Spurs. And I'm kind of just curious as what the community of San Antonio is really feeling about Kawhi right now.
Yeah, I would say that most of the community feel the way you do, and I call this Kawhi Leonard situation the biggest mystery in Spurs history. Because, I mean, for the first 6 years, Kawhi seemed like the quintessential Spur. He was all about playing basketball, not into social media, not into going out clubbing, not in ego. He was about being a great player and being the best player he could be ever since that injury at the hands of Zaza Pachulia against Golden State in the Western Conference Finals, game one a couple of seasons ago. So I think most fans are exasperated. I think a lot of fans feel like they're done with him. I think a lot of fans feel if Kawhi doesn't want to be here, then they should show him the door. Personally, though, I realize he's a top 5 player in the NBA, and he's arguably the best two-way player in the NBA, and those guys don't come around often. So, it's not like this is some run-of-the-mill player not wanting to be here. This is one of the best players you've had since Tim Duncan walked through the door in San Antonio. So, therefore, I am hoping, and I think it's what's happening, that the Spurs themselves are, exhausting every opportunity to try to mend this relationship, to try to figure it out, to try to find a way to come to an accord with Kawhi Leonard. It sure doesn't look like there's a lot of room for negotiation here based on what we're hearing from reporting. But then again, as I say that, we haven't heard anything specifically out of the mouth of Kawhi Leonard. It all seems to be leaking from his camp. So, it's still kind of a wait-and-see thing, but certainly, if credible reporters who cover the NBA for a living are correct, the situation is pretty bleak and pretty dire as far as any kind of a resolution between the Spurs and Kawhi.
Chris, what do you make of the Spurs organization right now? Obviously, with Lonnie Walker, we just got Marco Bellinelli, last week? Obviously, Kawhi, we don't know. TP is gone. Monty, we're not really sure, just as you mentioned. I mean, what do you make of the whole organization moving on to the 2018 season?
Well, as you know, as we say in San Antonio, in Pop we trust. Gregg Popovich and General Manager R.C. Buford, they're just absolute geniuses in the NBA. And yes, they've been dealt some cards that are very, very difficult, especially the Kawhi Leonard situation. But they're so good. I think DeJounte Murray is a huge talent. You mentioned Lonnie Walker, the fourth. He looks like an incredible talent with a great upside. I even like the second-round draft pick out of USC, Temezi Metu, who is a big man who can train an outside shot, who I think is going to have a future with the Spurs. And you got to remember, last season we essentially did not have Kawhi. Kawhi only played 9 games. The Spurs were 4-5 in those 9 games. And throughout most of the season, the Spurs were in the number 3 position in the Western Conference. I know at the end of the season they floundered a little bit, fell to the 7th seed. So I have faith in this organization. I have faith in Gregg Popovich, R.C. Buford, and the staff. I think they find a way to put a team on the court that's going to win about 48, 52 games this season, probably finish, third, fourth, or fifth in the West. I think they'll always be competitive, and I expect them to be once again this year.
Chris, my last question for you, going off of Gregg Popovich, I feel like he's had a very tough 6 months, obviously with his wife dying, and this whole Kawhi situation doesn't really make you feel any younger, or doesn't make anything better. And then, of course, TP is leaving. We saw that he did come out with a message just talking about Tony Parker's importance to the Spurs organization. And I know you've, probably talked to Coach Pop plenty of times, and you've been around the Spurs organization for so long. I guess for you, what do you think, is probably going through Pop's mind right now?
My goodness, as you mentioned, he lost his wife, Erin, during the playoffs. His soulmate, his life partner. They met back at the Air Force Academy, as you know. That's got to be just earth-shattering and such a huge loss. But according to reports, he's out there working. He's going to work with the Team USA basketball team in Las Vegas later this month, and he's going to coach that team in the Olympics in 2020. He's going to go to Serbia later in the month as well and work on an NBA program. I think it's Basketball Beyond Borders. It's my goodness. It's certainly got to be the biggest year of upheaval in his life, 2018. But again, you look at who he is, an Air Force Academy graduate, an officer and a gentleman, incredibly successful as a coach and as a human being. So if anyone is up to perhaps the most challenging year of his life, I think it's got to be Coach Gregg Popovich. And, you mentioned, you kind of alluded to his age. He's going to turn 70 this coming season. In January, he turned 70 years old. So one of the questions in San Antonio is, how much longer is he going to stay around? A lot of people believe he'll stay around until 2020 when he coaches that U.S. Olympic basketball team in Tokyo. But I tell Spurs fans, savor every moment of this. I said this in the Tim Duncan era. I say it in the Manu and Tony Parker era, and now Gregg Popovich era. One way or another, we're in the twilight of Gregg Popovich's career, and we have been blessed in San Antonio by Pop, by this team, by this organization. So you hate to see these things come to an end, and it has not yet. Certainly, the days are numbered. So I just advise everybody to enjoy every moment of this.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. And actually, you graduated from the Air Force Academy. Is that right? Or did I get that wrong?
I did not graduate. I went for 2 years.
Okay.
And I transferred to USC. So I was a cadet there for 2 years.
That's
but did
awesome.
not graduate.
That's awesome, though. Still, cool. Kudos to you, man. Well, I really appreciate you talking to me. Yeah, and I know you have a show coming up here soon. So thank you again. Is there anything else that maybe, you know of that some of us here may not know just about this Tony Parker situation, or even just the Kawhi situation that we didn't mention?
I think you covered it. I have a feeling, as I mentioned, what might be weird is we might see Parker, Manu, and Kawhi leave all this month. I have a feeling if the Spurs are going to make a move, they probably don't want the Kawhi thing to linger. But again, we don't know for sure. So I just keep an eye on Manu, keep an eye on Kawhi, and my goodness, what a summer of change this could be for the Spurs.
Yeah, the summer of 2018, not really the funnest summer. Well, thank you again. Yeah. Thank you again, Chris. I'll let you go, but I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Fantastic questions. I really enjoyed talking with you anytime.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.